you've got probably what you are now the owner of UFON as well as I think it's Saber Enterprises, and you've got a DVD out about alien implants, and I believe you got a new Alien Hunter book out. Is that pretty well correct?
Well, actually, I have two books. The first book I wrote was Evidence in Light, Alien Hunter, Evidence in Light, which anyone can go to my website, alienhunter.org, and both the books are there. And you can also see two videos, video clips of people with implants in their bodies right there. We filmed one of them in Brazil, and the other one is at Roswell at the museum, right there in the museum itself. That freaked everybody out. But those two videos are there as well as the two books. But the book, first, Evidence in Light, is a book about how I found physical evidence and how anyone can find physical evidence. You don't need me. How to find your own evidence, in effect, and what to do about it. The second book on alien implants is a study of alien implants and the 24 surgeries we've done to date. One of them, the latest surgery, being a month and a half ago in Flint, Michigan, where we took an object out of a lady's knee underneath the patella of the kneecap. We received a needle-like object that it's not a needle. It's way too big, and it's just very strange looking, so we're fixing to test that one now. But the implant book goes into all kinds of bizarre things. Obviously, the big questions everybody asks is, why are they here? What are they doing? What do they want? What's an implant? And in one of the chapters, I had a little fun, and I was talking to my co-writer the other day before we finished the book, and I said, in this chapter, I said, I want to address the big one. She says, what's that? And I said, do aliens have implants? And she said, that is just brilliant. And I said, well, of course, I wrote the book. Anyway, we can talk about that as well tonight, and it'll give people a better handle on what my thesis on the alien phenomena is, which I have to admit is radically different than the UFO community at large.
Yeah, that very concept about an alien having an implant, that sounds kind of radical to me. I mean, the aliens are the ones that's implanting the implants, aren't they?
That is correct, sir.
And you're thinking so you're asking, do they have implants as well as implanting implants?
That is correct.
Now,
to answer that question, if you want to discuss that first, does the alien have implants? The answer is, in my opinion, and I have to step back a little bit and say it this way: do aliens have implants? The answer to the question is, obviously, in my opinion, they do. And to set this up to make sense to your audience, we need to do it this way. In the view of most people in the UFO field and in general, most of us look at the alien as, and I'm going to paint a picture here with words of what we think to be real in the UFO community. First one is the little gray, the little guy. I'm just going to do this very briefly. The little short guy, he's about 2 to 3 foot tall. He has an IQ of about 80. And I can discuss this with anybody at any length, but I'm just going to throw things out there that people may or may not be familiar with.
Okay.
He's not very intelligent, makes all kinds of mistakes. He's a real short little guy. And the next guy in the usual suspects lineup I'm painting here is one often referred to as the doctor. He looks just like the little guy, but he's about 4.5 to 5 foot tall. And this guy is extremely intelligent. He's got an IQ of about 150, 160. Really intelligent, and everybody assumes that when you're the little gray guy, the little short one, you grow up and become the doctor. Well, you don't. What you're looking at is a finished product. These guys don't grow up and become anything else. They are what they are, and I'll explain that in a moment. My first abduction event in 1952 that I remember. The third entity I'd like to mention is in our usual suspects lineup, like a police lineup, because I used to be a cop, is an entity that looks like a reptile. And these guys are extremely sexual, very violent. They're pretty rough characters. Anybody's been around them, they know what I'm talking about. Another character is a human-like being, sometimes referred to as a Nordic, which is a misnomer. The fact is there are entities out there that look human-like that are red-haired, black-haired, blonde hair, and brown hair. I mean, we have all kinds. The idea that there is a quote-unquote Nordic and nothing else is just not true. That's just from someone that's not informed, or they've only seen just the one entity. There are numerous of these human types. They are discernibly different than human, but they are human-like. The next entity in the lineup is stands about 6'9" to nearly 8 foot tall. Some people refer to him as Bigfoot. We've actually seen him on craft with these other entities. In fact, all of these entities on the same craft at the same time. So some people say, no, they're all different races of aliens, and I'm going to kind of clobber that idea here in a minute with my own thinking. And as anything that I say tonight, you can buy it, not buy it, believe it or not believe it, it won't make any difference to me, because after 40 years of research and over 1,000 cases worldwide, I've come to some reasonably good answers after this kind of investigation during this time. The next entity I want to introduce on our lineup is an entity that is looks like for all practical purposes, a 6.5 to 7 foot tall mantis, praying mantis. It is an extremely intelligent being, usually in charge if you ever get to that level, and he knows exactly what he's doing. These entities will all often play good cop, bad cop, so you'll think they're good and saving the planet, fixing the ozone hole or whatever. And in another instance, one of them may be the very same one that's actually torturing you. And that people find that impossible to imagine, but the disparity in that concept is simply, in my view, that these entities are being controlled by someone else, and they're working for someone else, and what we're looking at there in that lineup that I've just painted, those are not 7 different races of aliens. They're 7 different models. And the best way for me to frame that is, if you go to a car dealership, you don't say, so show me 7 different races of Toyota. You go out there and look at 7 different models.
Right.
And that's what we're looking at here.
So you think they're automatrons? Yes. The reason I'm saying this is to answer the question, do aliens have implants? Having stated that, and we're making an assumption here that I'm correct, and for the sake of argument, we'll just assume that, and anyone can disagree with me, of course. But if that assumption is correct, that the alien is in fact working for someone else, and number 2, that these are different models, then they are actually constructed, in my opinion, based on many years' research and personal contact, by the way, some of it very painful, is in fact that these entities are constructed completely and literally are implants. And designed for specific purposes in each model. Or each model has its own purpose, in other words.
Thank you, Royce. That is actually, I couldn't have said it better, and I thank you for saying it. That is the way my view is. Now, in the illustration of this, one might ask the next obvious question, oh, no. They live on a distant planet. My question always to these people is, and how did you discern that information? What credible evidence do you have to support that? Well, they come from Zeta Reticuli. I said, how do you know that? Well, because they told somebody. I said, well, they've lied to me and everyone else I've ever known for many years. What makes you think that they're telling the truth in one time in all of these events? And even if they were, what makes you think they actually come from there, even if they told you where it was at? And I mean, they told one group of people that they came from planet Banlon. Well, Banlon happens to be a deodorant. They will often use the imagery or the information in your own head, see what's in there, and they'll use that imagery to make you agreeable to it. And most of us imagine planets that are so beautiful and so wonderful, and wonderful spaceships flying around and beings floating through the air, cosmic beams of light, and it's so wonderful. And maybe that's true, and maybe it isn't. But in the events that I've been in, and many others have, that wasn't quite exactly the story. Sometimes that's the mental imagery we're given But when you analyze the evidence or test that evidence, sometimes you find out those are screen memories or screensaver memories that are given to us to obfuscate or to hide some of their possible intent. And to finish up this little tirade, one might ask me the question, okay, buddy, what makes you think that they're not from some planet? Well, number one is the fact that they're constructed differently than anybody that would be on a planet, generally speaking. In other words, if evolution is true, and I don't think that it is, but if it is true, the alien is proof that it isn't. And I'll give you an illustration of this. When the little gray grows, it supposedly is going to grow up and turn into the doctor. A lot of people think that. They think, well, he'll just get bigger and he'll turn into the doctor, he'll get his training and all this and that. That never happens. That is not true. It's not even close to true. And if that were true, then the doctor, when he grows up, turns into the praying mantis, right? And then after the praying mantis grows, he turns into the human. And then after the human turns into a Bigfoot, and the Bigfoot turns into a reptile. None of that's true. That isn't even that's not even good science fiction. It's so bad. So the question is, then what are they and what are they doing and why are they here? Well, having been in the Central Intelligence Agency for 2 years and 3 years as a military police officer and a private investigator in the state of Texas for 25 years, currently doing bounty hunting and picking people up for heinous crimes and busting people for stealing people's money. So the last case I did was $110,000 theft. The point is that I have an investigative background, so my investigation and my methods of questioning and getting answers are based on more of a police and following more of a forensic technique, as opposed to, oh, they said something, so therefore it must be true. I just don't buy into stuff like that, nor anyone, including myself. My evidence, even for my own information, has to be, it has to make sense. It has to follow certain patterns of evidence and so on. I mean, it's just a reasonable approach. But that being said, there are certain, and some people may have access to this. If you don't, I can make sure they see it. But NASA has certain footage that's out, that's available if you know how to find it, and it's been out for a little while. And some of the footage shows craft that are of immense size. And this is not the first time we've heard the story, nor had it reported to us, even in our own abductees. But the fact is, this is the first time we've actually, quote unquote, had any photography other than our own film footage of a massive craft, 50 miles thick and 600 miles across, filmed by a Japanese, somebody in Japan, an astronomer, during one of our major mass abductions that happened here in Houston in 1992. We got footage of that, and we feel like that may in fact be the craft, but it is massive in size and was seen from Earth all the way to the moon. That's a pretty good sized craft. The second thing is in these NASA footages that we've looked at in the last 2 years, it shows craft that are strikingly bigger than the ones that we have film footage of. Now, the question one has to ask is, if you live on another planet, what in the world do you need a craft that's several thousand miles long? Well, if you're working for someone else, and you were probably manufactured there, made, cloned, or hatched, that might be the facility where our alien Dr. Moreau, so to speak, works and does his work and produces whatever it is he has to interact with quote-unquote humans and do whatever it is that he and they or whoever they are want done. So my thinking is that it is much more plausible that that's those ships out there that we're looking at, whatever they are, that are of immense size, they're obviously manufactured, And some of them, one of them particularly was sitting in the rings of Saturn. There are others that are out in that general area as well. They are so huge and so immense that it really begs the question, what in the world would you need a craft that's bigger than most cities?
Yeah, you got to ask yourself, what are they using to power such a huge ship?
Yeah, there are all kinds of questions. It's the statement alone is just pregnant with meaning and with answers, with questions that one has to try to throw out there. And again, this changes a lot of things for me in terms of the alien, and maybe I should go back a little bit to my own first event in 1952 when I was 4 years old. My point being that in that event, now since I have reviewed my event and everything, and I've never had hypnosis to recover memory or anything like that, never had any memory recovery like that, but because I have been involved in this research for so long, I finally put things together, and I got figured out what was happening. It's winter time. I'm 4 years old, 1952, and I see this white being leaving my bed, walking toward the wall. Now, he's long, tall, and skinny. He's tall for me because I'm only 3.5 years old. So, I mean, I'm nearly 4 years old. I mean, I don't know.
Behind a grasshopper.
There are no monster movies or anything on. I mean, my parents wouldn't let me watch something like that anyway if there were. This is 1952. I mean, they barely had TVs out there, so to speak. I mean, it's just programming is vastly different than anything we know today. And this thing is walking with me, and I'm set up in my bed, and I'm looking. I'm puzzled at what it is. It doesn't have any clothes on, and it's walking toward the wall, and I can't figure out why it's doing that because to me it's going to bump into the wall. Yeah, I have no clue the thing's going to walk through the wall. I don't know that. And I think in my head, what is that or who is that? And it instantly hears me thinking and turns around and realizes it's made a mistake. I'm not supposed to remember anything. I'm not supposed to know. This business of remembering all about your events, that's very, very rare in abduction events up into the 60s. It's extremely rare for people to remember a lot about their events. Only until people started remembering and recovering information did some of this stuff start coming out. Then the aliens realized they had to change some of the memories and create what we would refer to as screen memories at this point. And often people will remember a 3-foot owl that was in their room. And, of course, my question is, what's a 3-foot owl with large black eyes doing in your room? And, of course, they realize that doesn't make sense. And the reason the alien does that is to make you think, well, since it doesn't make sense, it obviously didn't happen then. And this makes people kind of just toss their own story as if it were imagined or dreamed or whatever. But the fact is, I was wide awake in my event, and he turned around and saw me, and I wasn't paralyzed, I wasn't afraid, I wasn't frightened, I wasn't anything. I didn't even know what the thing was. And as a little boy, as little kids do when people don't have clothes on, I noticed it didn't have a TT. I also noticed it didn't have a belly button. I noticed it didn't have those two other things that most people have.
Now I can see why you do the police work that you do. You're observant.
Well, I mean, if the little kids are they're just real simple. I mean, if you don't have any clothes on, they're not going to be looking at your face. They'll be wondering if you're. The first time I ever saw my sister, we're taking a bath, and I finally was old enough to figure out there was a difference between a boy and a girl. I thought she was deformed. And I realized my mom had explained to me, she's a girl and you're a boy. Oh, whatever that means. You know, I didn't have a clue. But the point is that it didn't have a TT. Now, after 40 years of investigation, Royce, I've come to realize that there's a lot of sense in what I'm looking at now. After investigating for 40 years, I realized if you don't have genitalia, you don't procreate. If you don't have a belly button, or a navel, you weren't born. You didn't get here like we do, whatever that means. And if you don't have mammary glands, you don't nurse. So what's the point? Well, the point is that whatever that thing is, it's not like us in any way, shape, or form. It was either cloned, hatched, manufactured, biomechanical, bio whatever. It would be, I would be far more comfortable with saying it was made rather than it was born, because that makes more sense. And again, going back and tying my story together, maybe that's what's going on in the big craft. Because you got to remember, we had 8 witnesses involved in the mass abduction event in December 8, 1992. 2 different times, 8 people were taken in a mass abduction in a 3-day period. And all of them came back telling the same story. Amazing stuff, absolutely amazing stuff. We had more physical evidence in that one case than we had in all our UFO cases at one time. It was that amazing, including an ocular implant that fell out of one of the abductees' eyes the morning after the last event.
Now, I take it you still have these implants, right?
I do.
And have you been able to figure out if they're tracking devices or exactly what they are?
Well, of course, my book describes this in detail for those that have to have the detailed answer. But the fact is, and I'll be as blunt as I can here, because I'm a to the point guy. I mean, I don't like to mess around. I mean, just tell me the big one. What is it? And I'll go from there. And the point is that the implants themselves are not tracking devices. They never have been, and they never will be. The important thing to understand about implants is I'm going to give you several great truths here. I don't care what you read on the internet. 99% of that stuff comes from somebody who thought they knew, who almost thought they knew, from somebody else who did think he knew, who read some of my notes, and hopscotched off of that. But a lot of this stuff is not based on people who have actually been there or done this. And after 24 surgeries, I assure you, I have a couple of clues. Number one is the objects, in fact, are not transponders. They're not devices used to locate you. If that were true, how did they find you to begin with? Number two, and I'll go even further than that, it is more likely that they find you with a neural scan. And it's not just you, it's the lineage of your family they're looking at. It always has been. It is, and it's not because you're special or unique and you're so wonderful, or I am. It isn't anything like that. It's you're the favorite lab rat, you know, something like that. Also, but that's not even true. It's much lower than that in my opinion. But the second thing is that they're not transponders, and the most important thing to realize, 2 things in my view. One is that implants are extremely, extremely rare to find. I look at several hundred X-rays a year from people all claiming they've got alien implants, and of course I know what I'm looking for. And one time I was looking at one of them that has a triangle. It looked like, I call it the AOLer. It looked like the AOL symbol with a dot in the middle of it, literally a triangle with a dot in the middle of it. It was a metal object in this guy's leg. And I'm standing there with a brain surgeon and a cardiovascular surgeon. We're in there looking at the X-ray in the X-ray room, looking at the object. Everybody else is in the other room. My film team from Israel is in there. Some people from MUFON, some of my friends, Don Waldrop, Jolene Harrington, and others are all in there waiting. And the brain surgeon says, "What do you think?" And I said, "The guy's a mechanic. He gets around on the ground. He crawls around on the ground. In my opinion, that's a metal shard that got up under his leg. There's no question he's an abductee. He's got 7 scoop marks down his leg, and his stories are consistent with the evidence. I said, but this is not an implant." And the cardiovascular surgeon says, "What do you want to do?" I said, "Let's remove it." He said, "Why do you want to do that?" And I said, "Because it shows that we're not afraid of anything, even if we know it's not an implant. We're not out there with an agenda, so to speak." And so we did remove it and had it tested. I had it tested in Scotland, and for a metallurgical firm, and they confirmed that it in fact was low-grade metal, the kind you would find in a place where people worked as a mechanic. And a little white cyst had formed in front of it, and that's what showed up in the X-ray. It's a little dot in the middle, and it had nothing to do with implants whatsoever. But people believe this. They believe that they got a lump, bump, or whatever. They definitely have an implant, and they got it, and there's no question about it. A physical implant. And that just, in most cases, is not true. And I don't want people scared half to death because I'm not a fearmonger. This stuff just is created by people to sell books and sell articles and this sort of thing, tapes and whatnot. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. And the second thing I want to tell people is not only are they very rare, but they're not transponders. They're not used to track you, find you, to listen to your brain and whatever. I mean, it's just not like that. Whatever you think about human implants and human technology, you need to throw it out the window when you consider the alien. And I don't mean, you mean they're so much further advanced than us, they're farther, they're whatever, a million light years ahead. First of all, they're not a million light years ahead of us. That is just not true. And number two is the fact is that although they are definitely advanced further than us, no question about that, but the fact is their technology is probably no more than 15, 20 years ahead of us. And that just stuns people to think that. And I point back to them, I said, now remember when the abductees were, like me and others were saying, we walked through a wall, we did this, we did that, they came through a wall and whatever, and everybody said, you're making that up because that's impossible, there is no way this can occur, I floated and I did this, and that's not true, you can't defy gravity. And yet you can do experiments in your own home right now. There's stuff you can do this with. You can float frogs, you can float bowling balls and all kinds of stuff on your desk and everything else. Easily. Anybody can do it now. Now that anybody can do it, it's no longer a big mystery. But before, we were all liars and making it up. No, we were simply reporting what was happening to us. That's all we were doing.
Now, before we go too far, because I've forgotten to, and we're already halfway into the show, as I'd like to mention your website, www.alienhunter.org, and I think you mentioned to me that you really got, 5 websites or more?
I've had several, Royce, and another one I have that for those of you with the investigative interest in it, or the conspiratorial minds, I have one called thehousedetective.us. And it's a site, because a lot of people look at me and say, no, wait a minute. You don't charge anybody for these surgeries you do on them? No. We do this as a philanthropic effort. We don't make money off of these abductees. I'm one of them. I wouldn't do it to another one. Well, then, how are you doing all that? You must be getting money, secret money from the government or some secret intelligence cabal or something, and that's how you're doing it, and you're spiriting all this stuff away. No, that's not true either. Sorry. Not into that. So then how do you pay for all this stuff? Well, number one, I beg, borrow, and pay for it myself. I get doctors to help me where I can, and where I can't, and I do it out of my own pocket. How can you afford that? Well, I am a real estate investor. I'm not a big one. I'm just a little small potatoes guy, just a little guy. And that's how I support myself and my family. And most of my UFO work, and I mean this honestly, keeps me broke because I spend a lot of my family's money on this subject. Unfortunately, helping out some of these clowns that are the most unkind in their comments. But the fact is, I care about the phenomena, I care about what's happening to people, and I want the truth. And I will go to great lengths to find it, and I've spent 40 years doing it, and I will continue to do so.
Okay. Well, I got to tell you, you really sound like you've been, you've been to hell and back, you might say, from the way you describe it.
I think that is a fairly interesting term. I'll sum up my whole experience in the abduction end of it, because I'm sure some of your people will probably be interested in that. My abduction experiences started in 1952 at age 4, as I mentioned, 3.5 to 4 years old. the things that happen to us as abductees, for the most part, many of us, is very private, and we don't want anyone to know. We keep it quiet. We hide this stuff. We live literally, as Dr. David Jacobs said in his fine book, live a secret life apart from our real life, whichever one is real. And I'll give you an example. My mother was watching History Channel or something here a while back, and she said, well, Derrell, I was watching History Channel the other night, and well, you were on there. And I said, yeah, Mom, you know I do UFO investigations. Yeah, I know, but well, they said you were an abductee. That's just not true. I said, well, yeah, it kind of is, Mom. Well, that's impossible. I said, why is it impossible? Well, because you would have told us. I said, no, ma'am, I didn't. I didn't tell you at age 4, and I didn't tell you later. And I said, I finally told Daddy when my little brother was 10 years old. He kept seeing UFOs and started describing these entities in great detail. I mean great detail, and things about them that you won't read in books. And that was back in the 70s. And my dad called me and said, get in here and straighten this boy out. And I said, okay. And I said, so Mike told his story. And I said, okay. And listened to him very carefully. And I said, well, Mike, I said, you know, the Close Encounters, the movie's on, and, you know, maybe you're imagining some of that. And your little, he had even built a little xylophone. You go, doo, 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 you know, like that, you know, like in the movie.
Right.
He built that in. And I said, well, Mike, I said, they made that up. And he looked at me with the sternest look on his little face, 10-year-old face, and said, no. He said, I know they made that part up. He said, but they got the tones wrong. I said, oh. And I looked at my dad, and I talked to him for a while, and I said, you better kind of fasten your seatbelt on, Dad. And he says, why is that? And I said, his events are real. He said, what do you mean? I said, I know I am trained to determine when people lie and tell the truth just by watching them. Most of the time, I teach this on the college level, I won't even let you talk most of the time. I'll answer your questions for you just watching it. And I said that I know Mike is telling the truth, and he's having these events. And Daddy's like, well, this is impossible. I said, yeah, I know that, but it's happening. That's the problem. And I said, you're never going to convince him it's not true. You'll never convince me. And he said, what do you mean? That's why I know his events are true, Daddy. And he said, why is that? And I said, because they happened to me. They started when I was 4, and they ended violently when I was 17. And I sat there and told my dad a lot of those events, and he sat there frozen to his chair. I mean, he just didn't know what to say. And made my little brother leave at that point so he wouldn't hear it. But I told my dad, and I told my mom this. She said, but he never told me that. And I said, well, now Daddy's passed away. I said, but you'd have to ask him why he didn't tell you. I said, I think you can figure that out. It just doesn't fit our paradigm, Mom. It doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't make, I said, the story that there are space beings here from another planet trying to help us save the planet, fix the ozone hole, or eat us or boil us or whatever. None of those stories work. That's not why they're here. They're not here to do any of those things. They're not here to conquer us. They're not here to eat us. They're not here to save the planet. They're not here to help you. They're not here to do any of those things. They're here to do whatever it is that they're sent here to do by whomever sent them to do it. And their job, and they live in the most militaristic society you can imagine, almost like bees, and they know their jobs, and they are fearful of their existence if they should fail. And I said, I'm telling you, I know what I'm talking about. I've been there. And I know these entities, and I've studied this for a long time, including the screen memories. I spoke with Dr. David. I'm sure most of your listeners probably know Dr. John Mack.
They ought to.
I know him personally. I did. And when I was in Istanbul, Turkey, we were all speaking, about 30 of us, Bud Hopkins, me, and Stanton Friedman, my buddy, and a bunch of other folks. I met John Mack for the first time. I'd seen him at a number of conferences, but this time he confronted me and said, Derrel Sims, I've been wanting to meet you for years. And I said, well, it's nice to be met. And we laughed and talked for a while, and he said, well, I have some questions for you. I said, I'm sure you do, Doc. And he said, I want to know why when you work with people, they come out abductees, and when I work with them, they come out mostly contactees. Why do you think that is? And I said, well, before I answer that, I said, I want to show respect. I said, first of all, I honor you for your Pulitzer Prize winning work and honor you for the fact that you're chief medical psychiatry at Harvard. Having said that, we're on equal ground. He said, that is true. I said, okay. I said, none of this is personal. He said, understood. I said, you understand as I do when people have an argument in scientific terms, it doesn't mean argue like in terms of fight with each other. It is a difference of information, and it's something that has to be settled. And he said, exactly. And I said, all right, we're all on the same footing here. And I said, I have an answer for you. And I said, and this is going to sting a little bit. He said, okay. I said, well, first of all, you're a new kid on the block. And I said, now all your degrees and your abilities and your MD and your chief medical psychiatrist at Harvard, all those things kind of overwhelm people. And they're like, oh, my God, if John Mack says I'm an abductee or contactee, I am. It's over. You know, whatever he says, that's it. And I said, and people respect your opinion with great revere. And he said, yeah. And I said, well, number one, you, in my opinion, don't know the difference between recall and memory. And he just looked at me stunned. And I said, may I illustrate my point? And he said, please do. And I said, okay. I said, when these entities come to us, I said, they install over our actual memory, in most cases, what we refer to as a screen memory. He said, that's true. I said, okay. I said, the screen memories are, in fact, false imagery and false memory. It is the real false memory syndrome over a real event that really occurred. He said, yes, I understand. I said, okay. I said, when you buy into a person's story, I was in the school of higher consciousness, and I was under this chandelier-like thing, and it was sprinkling these liquid knowledge upon me and all this stuff. I said, these are not the imagers that somebody's gone through. That didn't happen. I said, in most cases, those events didn't happen. That person's lying on the slab getting the treatment just like I did and everybody else did. But their imagery that is being programmed inside them with a large black eye right next to their head is you're in school of higher consciousness getting whatever it is, your education from another universe or whatever. And he says, okay. And I said, when you hypnotize a person who buys into their screensaver memory, I said, what happens if you're hypnotizing them the way I'm seeing you do this, and you're not the only one. You're hypnotizing the screensaver memory, the false memory, in other words. You're not hypnotizing their actual memory. You're hypnotizing their screensaver. Now, what that does, it starts a program running in them. It's already been ready to set and ready to go that we call a screen dream. In other words, it activates a program that never ever happened, and it produces this whole almost like a movie of an event that never even occurred, much less just the little imagery things that they have. And I said, as a result, I said, now I've worked with some of the people that, and I didn't tell him at the time. One of them was a psychologist that was on his team that came out and watched one of my surgeries, one of the first set of surgeries we did in California, and the second set of surgeries. And I didn't tell him this because I didn't want the psychologist getting in trouble with his team, because this psychologist was an abductee, not a contactee, and they had some pretty rough and pretty ragged negative experiences. And I said, so some of the people I work with, I said, you've actually already worked with, and when I finished taking the screen off, I said, they're having the same events we are. I said, I have people who are abductees and contactees, both. Some people have had bad treatments, some people have had normal treatments, so whatever that is, and some people have had very good treatment. They've actually been treated very kindly. I understand that. I said, my point to you is that when you hypnotize someone's screensaver memory, whatever that is, when that happens, the very first thing is these people believe exactly what you hypnotized them for, and they say, And you look at them and say, there it is. And they say, oh, my God, John Mack, and out of the School of Higher Consciousness, he just hypnotized me, so therefore that's the truth. I said, sir, you're not even close. And he just sat there stunned. Listen, I said, well, if you don't mind me saying so, you're doing what you're doing, sir. And then I said, I'd like to correct you on another issue. And he said, what's that? And I said, you said that you've been wanting to see me for years. And I said, the fact is, a letter was written by my senior investigator. He conversed with your best friend, who is a professor at Tulane University. He chairs the philosophy department there. And Dr. Timmerman, he said, yeah. I said, yeah, and he mentioned him. And I said, so you know I'm not making any of this up. I said, he wrote him a letter, and they've been conversing for some time. And finally, so Dr. Timmerman showed us a letter that said, you need to get down to Houston to meet two guys that are doing research down here. This was 1992, I think it was. He said, these guys are light years ahead of you, and you don't know what you're doing. I said, I know you got that letter, so I want to correct you on that. And I said, this is the first time we've met, and we've seen each other several times at conferences, and this is the first time we've had a discussion, and I'm glad to do so. I said, but my differences between you and your methodology and what I do, I said, that's the reason. I said, I get both. I said, I think you're hypnotizing these people screensavers, and as a result, you're getting a screen dream, which is part of a program that was canned from the beginning. I said, this is just the way it is. I said, the fact is, I don't think you know how these guys operate. I think you know pieces of stuff that you've read. I said, you got to realize that the vast majority of you guys out there doing these investigations have never been abducted, never seen a UFO, never had any of these experiences. You don't really know the truth of anything. The best evidence you have in a court of law is called hearsay. Someone told you what they thought. And you're accepting that as true, and it may or may not be. It probably is. But if it isn't, the point is you can't prove it one way or the other because you weren't there, so you wouldn't know. And that's my problem. I think you have some disadvantages there, and you need to pay attention to people who are there. And what about investigators? In my opinion, you're going to learn more from that. And that's my first thing.
Okay. Well, also, I'm showing 15 minutes remaining. I wanted to ask you, did you want to go ahead and extend the show for a few more minutes, or?
I can for a few. We can go for another 15 minutes or so after that, and but I've got an appointment this evening, so I won't be able to stay much longer, but I'm delighted with your show, just delighted.
Oh, thank you, Derrell. I really appreciate that. That means a lot to me. I also wanted to say that we haven't brought up the Angel Fire Symposium yet, and you've really given these people a lot about some of the stuff you're going to be covering there, and maybe you could kind of, give them a summary on that there, maybe, because I think you're also going to have a PowerPoint while you're there, if I'm not mistaken, aren't you?
That is true. I'm going to do a PowerPoint presentation at the Angel Fire presentation, and I'm doing several conferences in a row. One of them is in the Bay Area. I'll be doing one up there on October the 29th and 31st, and of course Angel Fire just right around the corner. The Angel Fire conferences, they're really good people. I met some of their people at Roswell. I speak at Roswell every year. I'm a board member there at Roswell on the Roswell Museum board, and as well as Stanton Friedman and a number of us that are. And when I'm going to Angel Fire here in this particular presentation, I'm going to be doing a presentation that I refer to as many hats. And many hats means that every time somebody asks me a question, I answer it based on the hat that I need to put on. Most people ask a question like, why are the aliens here? Why did they do this? Or why did they do that? And if you're wearing a UFO hat and you're answering that question, your answer is probably not going to be very coherent, because most UFO people don't know. That's why they're asking the question. If you have a cop hat on, so to speak, or an investigator's hat, and you've got, say, training to look at things from a very objective point of view, you get the different answers altogether. And I'll give you a couple of examples if you like. If people come to me and say, I've had this UFO experience and I feel like that, I've had this happen, I'll put my UFO hat. I'm going to listen to your story. I'm going to be very sympathetic and, I'm very kind. When you start filling out that form, at that point, my cop hat comes on. And it's almost brutal in this way it questions you. In other words, if you're lying, you're hallucinating, you're not telling the truth, you're fudging, I'm going to catch you. And that's not going to be real pleasant. But my point is that I'm not trying to be tough. What I'm saying is that when that cop hat gets on, it's no different than if you're questioning somebody out there, let's say somebody wrongfully accused you, Royce, of striking them. Somebody says, well, he hit me. And I walk over and I'm the cop that shows up on the scene. Now, do you want the cop to say, all right, we're going to arrest you, Royce, because he said so? No, that's not the way it ought to be. We have to find evidence to support what it is he said. Or, in fact, he may have attacked you and you defended yourself. So my UFO hat doesn't ask all those questions. My cop hat does. And it's pretty brutal in the way it gets to the truth. The next thing is if I put my medical hat on, then it's going to look at you from a medical point of view and a psychological point of view. And the questions are going to be directed based on that mentality. It's going to be based on a Bayesian logic, so to speak. And then when the cop hat's finished and it does all it's supposed to do or can do or thinks it can do, lo and behold, I have another hat that I put on too, and that hat is called a profiling hat. A profiler hat is, and this is one of the things I'll discuss in the conference, it is really pretty powerful. When I put on my profiling hat, what I do basically at that point is literally, let me back up a bit. If a cop does all he can, let's say he's following a serial killer, and they can't catch this guy. They do everything they can to catch him. The very first thing is this is not just TV. This is actually real stuff.
I must say I saw this on Criminal Minds.
I don't watch TV hardly at all, so I don't watch stuff, but I'm just telling you from my own experience and my own training. When the cop does everything he can, you do everything you can, then you finally take a case to a specialist called a profiler. And these people are just almost magical. And I'll give you a nice metaphor here. It stings a little bit to UFO folks. When a UFO guy's got his evidence, he's got photographs and picture and whatever, different stuff. And he says, hey, look at this. Look at my pictures. I've got a picture of flying sword. I got this, I got that. And I'm, oh, boy, this. And look at these over here. Look at these marks on these people. And he's all excited, jumping up and down. He's got his UFO hat on, you see. Then he shows that to a police investigator who's also a UFO guy, who's well-trained. And the cop just kind of looks at him and smiles, says, okay, and realizes this guy doesn't have a clue. He's just a real nice guy that's got some pictures and evidence and doesn't have a clue how to analyze it, look at it, or even think about it. And so the cop looks at it and he investigates it. And he may take this case on, look at it, and he may realize this thing is massive, it's huge, it's a great case, and so on. When he gets to the end of it and he can't do anything further, and he takes it to a profiler. The profiler kind of looks at him about like the way he looked at the UFO guy, kind of smiles, realizes you're at the end of your rope, and that's why you're here. When he finishes, and I'll give you a beautiful illustration of this, because we're working on it right now. When the UFO guy looks at those cut scars, lumps, bumps, and weird things you see on these people, he says, I got 13 of those and 2 of these and 1 of those. I never saw that one before. He didn't have a clue what he's looking at. And he doesn't get it. And he can sit there and surmise all kinds of things, but he really doesn't know. And when I finish with it, I've had our medical team look at it and look at all these other things, note from my own self, from a lot of the experiences in there and so on. and I can give you a dozen stories to prove this in hospitals as well, UFO events that were actually in hospitals. And when I look at those same lumps, bumps, cuts, scars, and I had a case 30 minutes before I came on this program, I told a lady I had got to get off the phone. I've got a radio program I got to do here. And they've had some amazing experiences, and we may discuss this later perhaps this week sometime if we get a chance. But the point is that the individual, when I look at the lumps, bumps, cuts, scars, bruisings, and different things on these people, as a profiler, what I'm looking at is something vastly different. I see far different than the cop does, who's a UFO guy. He's looking at it as a crime scene is what he's looking at it as, because he knows that's what it is. He knows that. UFO guy, he's out there buying into whatever the local theory is that works for him, you know. And if it sounds good and cool, then that's when he's going to be out promoting. But it's not based on any real evidence. It's just based on, you know, fun stuff to talk and think about. And when I look at these lumps, bumps, cuts, and scars on these people and look at their story and go over the whole thing and analyze it, in many cases I can tell you what was done, and in some cases why it was done, in some cases how it was done, and more importantly than anything, who in all likelihood did it and to what end. Now that's what a profiler does. He takes your serial killer as an example and starts describing the guy's thinking. I'm a handwriting analyst. I look at people's handwriting samples. These are telltale signs of what your brain's thinking when you're writing. And handwriting is not hand, it's self-writing, it is brain writing. All these different skills that I use, all my policing skills, I've and paid for thousands of dollars worth of additional training specifically for the purpose of UFO study. When people come to me, they're usually not coming, let me show you my picture, let me show you this. They're usually not like that at all. They're like, I've had this incredible event, and I don't know what to think about it, I don't know what to do. And they start showing these cuts, bruises, scars, or whatever, x-rays, different things like this, and they sit there just stunned, and they don't know how to deal with it. And they don't know what to do. And they're not looking for somebody to save the planet or fix the ozone hole or anything like that. They're not looking for aliens from other planets and whatever. What they're looking for is answers, and they want to hear something that is substantial, something that is credible. And the biggest thing that most of these people want to hear from me is for me to prove to them that they made it up, they hallucinated it, or that they dreamed that none of it's true. They prefer to hear that.
Because nobody wants to admit the reality.
One of the most horrible things, a lady came and told me about she said, Mr. Sims, she said, I know this is crazy, I know it's wrong, and I just had to come on and see you, I just had to talk to you. And he was right here in Houston, and I had this horrible dream last night, and I know I made it up, it's just a dream. I know that it's just a dream. She said, they made me hold this creature that looked kind of like them, a little one, and I didn't want to do it, and they said, it's going to die if you don't hold it. And, of course, that's a ruse. It's just to get you to hold it. It's going to die anyway. In all likelihood, they have a huge mortality rate with these entities, and for various reasons. But the point is that they want you to think it's going to die because you're responsible and you didn't do whatever you're supposed to do. Well, what was going to happen if I didn't get there, you know? I mean, so people just don't think like that. So anyway, I said, so what did you do? I told her, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to hold it. And she said, I said, what happened? She said, she just broke down and started crying. She says, this is just a dream, Mr. Sims. It can't be true. And I said, tell me what you saw. This is all conscious, by the way. She said they brought in a little girl in ragged clothes that looked just exactly like my 6-year-old daughter. And she says, that girl was wild. I said, you mean like she'd never seen a human before? She said, exactly. I said, I understand. She said, well, where does that come from? I said, we'll talk about that in a minute. I said, it may not have even happened anyway. Like you said, it really could have happened. It's impossible. I said, okay. finish your story. She said, well, finally, when they convinced me that that was that girl was related to me, she said, I held that nasty little thing and said, I held it this way. And I said, show me exactly how you held it. And she showed me how she held it perfectly. And I said, are you absolutely sure? And she said, yes. And so I got my $400 black light with various different nanometer lengths and brought it in there. Had my wife come in and said, I want you to watch this. And she said, okay. And she showed me exactly where you held that. And she said, I did this, I did that. And I said, okay. And I told my wife, take the black light and check her while I leave the room. And every place that she said she had touched with that baby, whatever it was, had suckled or had its little mouth-like thing on her neck or any other part in her hand. All those parts showed the most brilliant fluorescence you ever saw. It was indelible. It penetrates the skin subdermally on contact, and you can't get it off. And she screamed when she saw it. At that point, she realized, oh, my God. So it's true.
Okay.
On her.
Could it be, though, that what they were doing was using one of these screensaver memories you mentioned to get her to grab hold of a mechanical device that had these devices that did this to her skin that you were mentioning?
Oh, it's entirely possible. The problem is that I discovered fluorescence in 1992. It is a fluorescent substance that exudes itself from the entities. It's like a sweat is the best way to think about it. There are different colorations, and they mean different things. They're at various different nanometer lengths, and I know exactly what those nanometer lengths are. And I've been studying this for years. Study at MIT, one scientist there asked me to write a scientific paper on fluorescence. That's how, he said, in my opinion, he said, the two greatest things ever discovered in the UFO field, ever. Number one was implants discovered by you in 1960 when you were implanted at age 12. And he said the second thing, and I think it's even more important, is the fluorescence that you discovered. He said, Derrell, I'm telling you, he said, people don't even know where you're at. He said, they don't even have a clue. He said, and this stuff is just incredible. He said, you need to write a paper. And I said, no science paper is ever going to, nobody's going to ever publish a science paper I write. And he said, they will. And he said, because I will co-author it with you if I have to. He said, but I promise you, you will be published. Anyway, to answer your question, I believe that the event that she described was in fact true, and it was not a screen memory. That's what was so upsetting about it to her. None of it had the flowery imagery of the school of higher consciousness or this, and I was learning, and I was doing this, whatever, the flowing robes or whatever. None of that stuff was present, and she was traumatized to no end. The incredible thing is, I asked her at the end of this, I said, is there anything else? And she said, yes. And she said, before I came over here, she said, my little daughter confronted her, the little 6-year-old daughter she has. Mm-hmm. She said, Mommy, when are we going to see my sister? She said, sweetie, you don't have a sister. She said, yes, I do. She's on board the craft. She looks just like me, Mommy. I said, sweetie, let's go back to a time in your medical history here. And she says, okay. I said, remember when your daughter was, when you were pregnant with your daughter? She said, yeah. And I said, what was the circumstance of your pregnancy? She said, well, I was diagnosed with twins. I said, yes. And? She said, well, when I had my baby, she said, I only had one. I said, I understand. Is it possible somebody could have gotten the other one? And then she started crying. She said, oh, we're going to save my little baby. I said, sweetie, even if you could get her, you wouldn't want her. I said, what's been done to her and the way she is now? I said, when you described her as wild, feral would be a better term. It ain't human anymore. It's human-like. I said, there are things beyond most of our imaginations out there of what go on to some of these kids who get taken and never returned. I said, you just saw one of them. It happened to be your daughter.
You see, it had to be pretty upsetting for her.
Oh, she was washing the ground with tears. And she's one of these people like me that has to know. They don't care what it is. I have to know. And that's what pushed me into what threw me into the UFO phenomena, Royce, was not that I was studying UFOs and flying. I liked it. I did that as a kid, and I had no idea. I never put together all these events that happened to me for 13 years, from age 4 till age 17. It never occurred to me that these were all related, and there was all these events, weird series of events, are all linked, and that's all the same thing. I didn't know. There were no books or anything out there. I wasn't reading this stuff. I never went to UFO reviews or anything. I didn't know anything about any of this stuff. So, I just liked the UFO phenomenon because I would see a disc occasionally, a beautiful orange disc or something like that, and I'm just like stunned. Wow, what in the world is that? And I live right next to Holloman Air Force Base, a missile range. I see missiles. I see all kinds of stuff. I was privy to see things a lot of people weren't. And these were not anything we had. I saw some incredible stuff in the desert out there. And but anyway, I was my events ended violently at age 17. And at age 17, nothing else happened. And then I thought, well, this is great. Nothing happened for years after. And I thought, yay, And nothing ever happened. So I thought, I'm home free. This is it. And one night, my wife and I were you live in Houston. There's a place called Meyer Road out in New Caney. Right down the street from us, we had an event called the Cash Landrum event, which you're probably well aware of, where a craft of some type, which in my opinion was from our intelligence boys, and came down and melted part of the highway, and they literally replaced part of the highway there. And I know that because I was there. I saw the replaced highway. The fact is that in that area, shortly thereafter, my son was abducted. I woke up at 2:30 in the morning, running as fast as I could. I ran past my son's room in our we had a large ranch home on 4 acres then, and I knew my son wasn't in the room. And the same feeling I had in every one of my abductions, they're here. I woke up instantly and ran as fast as I could to find him. And I knew he was in the living room. I went in there, and there's my little son standing there looking out the back window in a deep trance. And I looked at him, and I said, David, what are you looking at?
Oh.
And that's the screensaver.
And that had to be scary for you.
I was beyond mortified because I knew what had happened to him, and this was just beyond a nightmare for me. Well, my wife next morning is listening to David tell his story, and he remembers quite a bit of it consciously, and other parts of it he doesn't remember, and he wants me to hypnotize him, and I don't want to do it. And my wife says, well, you probably should do it, and he wants to, and I said, I don't want to do it. And I laid out as long as I could for months. I did not want to know. I already knew. I just didn't want it confirmed. And sure enough, once my wife put 2 and 2 together, she looked at me and says, why don't you tell us what's really going on? And I'm standing there with egg all over my face, and I said, well, I have to go back a few years, and so I told them the whole story. And she says, and now it's here. And I said, they come from my son. And so from that day forward, I became the alien hunter. I hunt them that hunted me and then hunted my son.
Which is all the more reason why it means enough to you that you'll pull it out of your pocket if you need to, because you got a vested interest twice in it.
Thank you. And other people are going through the same thing, and my heart goes out to them. It does. I mean, it tears me with claws, some of the things that happen to these people. And for those out there that say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, mine was all wonderful and great. Hey, get you some jelly beans and have a great time. I'm glad you had a great time, and I hope it continues that way. Thank God for that. Great. That's not what happened to me, and I remember my events, and I bear broken bones and everything else from that. I wrote a paper called Them Bones. A lady who is a neurologist, a neurosurgeon in Houston called me one day and said, Mr. Sims, do any of the people that you work with as abductees, do you feel like that some of their injuries have been covered up? And I said, what do you mean? And she says, well, some of the people I'm looking at here have had car wrecks and different things like that, and these are just cover-ups for other injuries that happened before the car wreck, and there's no medical records of it. And I said, yes, ma'am, we do have cases like that. She said, how does that happen? I said, well, some of these people come back and say, I was healed by the aliens, and that sounds wonderful. The question is, why were you busted? and I said, I have to give an example of myself here. It's in my book as well. Alien Hunter, Evidence and Light. And I went to the VA hospital here a while back for a checkup, and the doctor said, well, where did you get that? In your nasal passage, there's a big hole there. That somebody's done surgery in your nasal passage. When did that happen? I said, I've never had a surgery in my life from my nasal passage. He says, well, and we went through several possibilities, and of course, what I didn't tell him, and I later told my primary care physician, I said, actually, I have been through a surgery there. I said, I would call it butchery, but we can use the word surgery if it works better for everybody. But I was 12 years old, and I got a nasal implant, and that's part of the procedure. That's part of what went on. And she just didn't move. And I said, I know you think that this is pretty weird and pretty wild, and here I am, very sane, very coherent, talking, you telling me this stuff. I said, but young lady, I said, as fine a doctor as you are. I said, I've got two cardiovascular surgeons, several MDs like you, and a brain surgeon that work with us on this stuff. I said, believe me, I'm in real good company. I said, these are people who live in Santa Monica. They make a lot more money than you and I do. So she said, well, I noticed that you had some broken ribs. And I said, that's correct. And I said, the doctor before you, my other primary care physician, a male, said, well, he said, I'm looking here at your broken ribs. And he said, how do you feel? And I said, well, I feel a little pain here on my left side. And he said, no, it's on your right side. And I said, no, it's not. It's on my left side. And he said, no, it's on your right side. And I said, don't tell me where my pains are at, Doc. I'll tell you. And he said, but your broken ribs are on the right side, Mr. Sims. And I said, sir, I don't have any broken ribs. He said, yes, you do. And then he called up the radiologist. They got in a big argument about it. And the radiologist said, I make $250,000 a year. Don't you tell me I don't know why I do what I'm doing, blah, blah, blah. And he puts the phone down and says, you got broken ribs on the right side. Well, I didn't tell the doctor the whole story. He's right. In my last event at age 17, my ribs were broken. They did it. It was a very violent event. And the question is, when you get broken ribs, and my wife had broken rib one time, and she could barely breathe for off and on for 2 weeks. I mean, you can hardly move. You can't get in certain positions. You can't sleep in certain positions. You can't do anything with a broken rib. I had several broken ribs. So what's the point? Well, by the next morning, I had broken ribs, but they'd already been healed up. Well, that's because the aliens love you and healed you up. No, it's because they covered up what it is that happened and didn't want anybody to find out. Because in some of our cases, some of these parents were almost dead when their kids were taken in for examinations, and the doctor, in one particular case, happened in 1992. When I found out about it, 1992, in Phoenix, Arizona, lady said, when I was a little girl, said my parents took me to a doctor, because I fell and hurt my arm, and it didn't break or anything. And the doctor looked at it and saw that I had broken bones in my arm that had been healed. Of course, then he looked at my mom and dad and said, when did she get these broken bones? And they said, well, she never had any. He looked at her, looked at them, picked up the phone, called the police. That's called child abuse. She said, the only reason my parents weren't arrested is because I convinced everybody in that room I had no conscious memory of ever being injured, ever. She said, but the evidence was crystal clear. I, in fact, had broken bones in my arms. Somebody had broken them and fixed them so that I wouldn't know. And that's what the neurosurgeon was asking the question about. People who hide, these entities who do stuff to people and then turn around and hide it by, quote unquote, healing us.
Well, I got to tell you, that was really, I hadn't thought about that before, but now that you mention it, I can see how that can happen. I mean, and you got to look at it from the police's and the doctor's perspective. They really don't know, and they can't take chances, but it's still the kind of thing that you don't want to look at. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Now,
doctors were more than horrified to listen to my explanations because there's no medical records, period, of my broken bones. And believe me, if you've got a side of your ribs that are broken, say 3 ribs, and you think you're going to run around and jump around and do, I'm a martial artist. I'm a 4th degree black belt in the martial arts now, but I was a black belt then. You think you're going to jump around and do anything? I got news for you. You're not. You have never had broken ribs if you think you're going to do stuff like that. Anybody's had broken ribs, they know what I'm talking about. And if you've got 3 of them, you can barely breathe. The next morning, I didn't know that I had broken ribs. Somebody had cleaned up the job, and then it was only accidentally discovered. And that's how we find a lot of evidence, accidentally. And when my doctor had me go to radiology and had me x-rayed for a chest x-ray and saw those broken ribs, that's when he asked the question, when did you get your broken ribs? Well, I told him I never had it. And he said, yes, you did. These are not someone else's x-rays. They're yours. And that's the reason I wrote the paper, Them Bones. And it's about a dozen case histories of people just like me. I end up with me as the final example. And some of the things that happened to me. And I remember my events. I know what happened to me. I was conscious and I was there.
And this is the kind of evidence that a lot of people want to shrug off, too. But before we go, go ahead.
True.
I was going to say, before we get too much further, I don't want to let the chance get away to, mention the fact that, you said you was going to do a PowerPoint display, or a presentation, but was this here going to cover these big 600-mile-long aircraft that are 50 foot thick and show some of the implants and the broken bones and stuff like that?
They will. Well, the presentation I'm going to do out there. In fact, we have a meeting at the Houston UFO Network, and we hope to have one this Friday night. If we got one last thing to check on, and our room will be reserved. But this Friday night we'll have a meeting. If we get the room approved and everything. But we have meetings there once a month, and I'll start posting some of that information to you, and you can post it on your website if you like. And people can know, and if they live in the Houston area, they're welcome to come to the meetings. It's very inexpensive. We have UFAS speakers, and in fact, we're going to have you as one of our speakers because you've got some information that I think that a lot of our members would like to hear.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to that. So is my wife, for that matter. She doesn't get out of the house as often as we did when we were first married. Or actually, I don't either, for that matter. But it sounds like it's going to be great. And I'm looking forward.
And generally, we like last month we had a friend of mine who's a NASA scientist come up and speak about UFOs and about his own contact experiences. Straighten the hair on half the people in that room. People were not prepared for this guy at all. Totally straight-laced, 100% scientist, my buddy, and then somebody made the mistake of saying, well, have you ever had any experiences? Then the change on his face went from Mr. Scientist to victim. And he started telling some stories, and I'm telling you, it was amazing. Amazing. Abductees and contactees always amaze me. They do. They've had experiences that most of us read in books and can't. We just have to imagine because we don't know. We don't know what they went through and what really happened. Most of us just don't have a clue. They're really amazing people in my view.
I think a lot of the people that's just doing the research are amazing people. I've had people like Stanton Friedman, Dennis Balthaser, Ron Rieger, the list goes on, Nick Pope and Nick Redfern, and we've talked about some of this here stuff before, and you guys, y'all just go through so much to, be able to share this information and to bring it forward. And most of y'all do such, detailed work. You have a lot of integrity, and I think you're just a credit to the ufology.
Well, Ron Revere he's a scientist that's also a member of our team. I brought him here from another state. He wants to just do a presentation here and do a TV shoot with me. But brilliant guy, DSP satellite specialist, and can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that the United States government has forensic evidence of UFO contact. And they can prove UFO contact because there are DSP satellite logs that show the craft in the area in a lot of these events. These are called fast walkers, and sometimes they're called slow walkers. These are craft that move very slow or not at all. They just sit there for long periods of time. And others that move at incredible speeds that make no sense, because if an aircraft were traveling that fast, it would tear the bark off of trees if it went by low enough. And the fact is, these don't even make a dust devil when they go by.
Yeah, and I've recently had Robert Miles on. He's got his fast walker side up, and he goes into quite a bit of detail on it. You weren't on his movie by any chance, were you?
No, that was a funny thing. I was asked to head up that whole show originally, and I finally declined. And and I said, you're missing some points here. And I said, what do you mean? I said, look, in all good respect to you and in your efforts here, I said, there's some people that need to be on this program that you're not putting in here. And he said, well, we want this. And I said, well, you're going after press. You're not going after the real stuff. I said, I've got a top secret clearance. I said, that cost $250,000 for the United States government to have that clearance for me. And that was in 1968. I said, there are other people I'm going to recommend here who've got top secret clearances and others. And my point is, these people are beyond reproach. I mean, they have some of the people you're putting on this program, I said, they're parroting other people as if they knew. They don't know. I said, but they're well known, and so people say, well, since they said it, it's true. I said, that don't mean a thing to somebody like me. I said, the only one I want to talk to is the guy who was in the field that did it. I said, when you're talking to people like Ron and myself, we've actually been there. We know what we're talking about. And we've got the clearances to back it up. I mean, the government didn't give me a top secret clearance because they thought I was a crank. That is just never going to happen. If they thought that for an instant, never happened.
No, they can't give those clearances out to just anybody. They got way too much writing on that.
Well, and you're sitting there doing things that one of the things I did was to bodyguard Karen Sims and Helms, Director and Deputy Director of the Central Intelligence Agency, provided top secret security for a top secret CIA installation in country. I mean, this kind of stuff that they're not going to hand that to anybody. You're going to have to be vetted in ways that most people don't even understand. And once you pass the muster, then maybe it'll happen for you. But anyway, the point is that for me, evidence has to be. It can't be just a story. I mean, people tell me stories all the time. Oh, they show me their cut, their bruise, or whatever, they're whining or whatever, crying or whatever it is, And I did the same thing. But the fact is, when the cop hat gets on, or the medical hat gets on, or the psych hat gets on, or the profiler hat gets on, that's a different story. And all those hats look at you totally differently. And they all have different points of view and different questions and different reasons for asking those things and for finding out stuff. When you put all those hats on, for me, the bottom line for the story tonight is this. With all my hats, I get to see things and know things that a lot of other people never get to know. And the reason is because all those hats, and what I do in the conference at Angel Fire is a good example, is I'm going to ask people to try on some of those hats. And I'm going to show them what it's like to look at evidence with each different hat on.
Oh, wow.
It's a pretty powerful presentation.
Now, see, I like that. I really do, because now people are going to be able to see firsthand experience, like, hey, there's more to this than I really realized before, because it's one thing to be told there's a lot involved. It's another thing to start trying it and then see how much there is yourself.
That's a fact. That is a fact. And one of the, of course, one of the last the thing we can close with tonight is everybody always wants to know who they are and where they come from, and I think we've told enough about them to give everybody that's a serious thinker enough hints to start questioning lots of things. And one of the things that we found that was amazing, and I mean this just literally is amazing to me, in rare instances, and I'm talking rare here, very rare, I can count them on one hand, we have actually had credible UFO abductees have events where something showed up that was alien and then something worse than that, and probably one of their bosses. And we've actually had, in rare cases, again, 5 of the events, one of them happened in my own home, so I know how true it was. Something angelic show up. Now, the amazing thing about that part of the story, and this has happened in several different occasions, several different places, with actually several different famous people have had these experiences as well in their abduction events. The alien can't get out of there fast enough. That's the most amusing part of that whole story. That was a total surprise for us. No one had ever thought in terms of, something angelic being involved. And of course, some people, again, who are not in the know say, well, the aliens are just angels. Well, they're not even close. Not even remotely close. And again, I can put my cop hat on or my profiler hat and go back to evidence. Again, the bottom line isn't opinion. The bottom line for me is evidence.
Right.
And that's the bottom line for me. That's just where I exist.
See, that's one of the things that I've heard of before is you got one camp that will invariably say all UFOs are extraterrestrial. The other ones will invariably say, no, they're all interdimensional. And I've always wondered, why couldn't some of them be extraterrestrial and some of them interdimensional? See, this is where I disagreed with Zachariah Sitchin and Mike Heisler both, because those are two camps out there right there that do that. You see what I'm saying?
Well, there's, again, the extraterrestrial hypothesis for most people or scientists, they don't buy into it. And the reason they don't is because there's no evidence to support it. One has to go to the Drake's equation and things like that and say, well, since there are millions of planets out there, there must be millions of civilizations. Well, that is kind of a misnomer, even from an evolution point of view.
Right.
I mean, you have to, again, if you study advanced levels of evolution, you find out that the chances of anything evolving, period, even remotely, even in any semblance of what we may have here, even bipedal beings, as an example, it's just not going to happen. The chances of that are just non-existent, virtually. And they actually had some mathematicians in 1968, I think it was, at the major convention, the evolution convention. They brought mathematicians in to prove evolution, and the mathematicians studied for quite a while on this, did the presentation, and they told everybody, said evolution is possible. They said that, so everybody's yelling, yay, yay, see there, we proved it. And they said, well, not quite. And they said, what do you mean? Mathematicians said, well, math is really kind of an exact thing, and it takes a certain amount of time to do certain things for something to evolve. And they said, yeah. And they said, you don't have enough time. I said, what do you mean? He said, there's not enough time for things to have even evolved on this planet. Well, it just ruined the concept. What? So they told the mathematicians to go back and do their study. It reminded me of the movie, Mozart, the movie, where he told the king, said, well, when your song was almost perfect. And he said, but it was perfect. And he said, no, the human ear can only hear a certain amount of noise, and therefore, the king didn't have a clue what he's talking about. He said, therefore, just cut a few notes and it'll be perfect then. He said, perhaps your majesty had something in mind. What particular notes did you have in mind for me to cut? Well, the king was furious with him at that point. He just glared at him. But it's the same type of thinking here. You don't tell mathematicians, go back and check your figures. They already did. That's why they're there at a science conference. And they just proved to them that, in fact, evolution can exist based on the math. They said, well, it does exist. They said, well, we agree with all that. In our opinion, that it does exist, but we can't figure out how it could exist because there's not enough time based on your own and our own computations.
Right.
It's going to take a lot more billion years than what we have here on the planet. And they, of course, it just ruined the conference. And I said, well, go back and study your stuff because you know what you're talking about. You don't stand there and tell a mathematician, and you're not a mathematician, go back and study your stuff because he didn't know what he's talking about. It's like telling Mozart, cut a few notes in your last concerto and it'll be perfect. Yeah, well, which notes did you have in mind? You don't have the skills to say that. You know, it's just not. That's just rude. So my point is that, in my thinking, that some of these craft, in fact, are closer. They would be. I'm in the vein with probably people like Jacques Vallée as an example. I think that it would be closer to say these will be dimensional or interdimensional, as opposed to from another planet. It doesn't mean that they can't be craft out there and that they're not on a planet, but what I'm saying is they didn't come from there. Just landing somewhere doesn't mean you came from there. But anyway, that's the bottom line for me, and I hope your audience enjoyed what I did have to say and find it useful.
That you've got probably what you are now the owner of UFON, as well as I think it's Saber Enterprises, and you've got a DVD out about alien implants, and I believe you got a new Alien Hunter book out. Is that pretty well correct?
Well, actually, I have two books. The first book I wrote was Evidence in Light, Alien Hunter, Evidence in Light, which anyone can go to my website, alienhunter.org, and both the books are there. And you can also see two videos, video clips of people with implants in their bodies right there. We filmed one of them in Brazil, and the other one is at Roswell at the museum, right there in the museum itself. That freaked everybody out. But those two videos are there as well as the two books. But the book, first, Evidence in Light, is a book about how I found physical evidence and how anyone can find physical evidence. You don't need me. How to find your own evidence, in effect, and what to do about it. The second book on alien implants is a study of alien implants and the 24 surgeries we've done to date. One of them, the latest surgery, being a month and a half ago in Flint, Michigan, where we took an object out of a lady's knee underneath the patella, the kneecap. We received a needle-like object that it's not a needle. It's way too big, and it's just very strange looking, so we're fixing to test that one now. But the implant book goes into all kinds of bizarre things. Obviously, the big questions everybody asks is, why are they here? What are they doing? What do they want? What's an implant? And in one of the chapters, I had a little fun, and I talked to my co-writer the other day, and as anything that I say tonight, you can buy it, not buy it, believe it or not believe it, it won't make any difference to me, because after 40 years of research and over 1,000 cases worldwide, I've come to some reasonably good answers after this kind of investigation during this time. The next entity I want to introduce on our lineup is an entity that is looks like for all practical purposes, a 6.5 to 7 foot tall mantis, praying mantis. It is an extremely intelligent being, usually in charge if you ever get to that level, and he knows exactly what he's doing. These entities will all often play good cop, bad cop, so you'll think they're good in saving the planet, fixing the ozone hole or whatever. And in another instance, one of them may be the very same one that's actually torturing you. And that people find that impossible to imagine, but the disparity in that concept is simply, in my view, that these entities are being controlled by someone else, and they're working for someone else. And what we're looking at there in that lineup that I've just painted, those are not 7 different races of aliens. They're 7 different models. And the best way for me to frame that is if you go to a car dealership, you don't say, so show me 7 different races of Toyota. You go out there and look at 7 different models.
Right.
And that's what we're looking at here.
So you think they're automatrons? Yes.
The reason I'm saying this is to answer the question, do aliens have implants? Having stated that, and we're making an assumption here that I'm correct, and for the sake of argument, we'll just assume that, and anyone can disagree with me, of course. But if that assumption is correct, that the alien is in fact working for someone else, and number 2, that these are different models, then they are actually constructed, in my opinion, based on many years' research and personal contact. Well, we finished the book, and I said, in this chapter, I said, I want to address the big one. She says, what's that? And I said, do aliens have implants? And she said, that is just brilliant. And I said, well, of course, I wrote the book. Anyway, we can talk about that as well tonight, and it'll give people a better handle on what my thesis on the alien phenomena is, which I have to admit is radically different than the UFO community at large.
Yeah, that very concept about an alien having an implant, that sounds kind of radical to me. I mean, the aliens are the ones that's implanting the implants, aren't they?
That is correct, sir.
And you're thinking that, so you're asking, do they have implants as well as implanting implants?
That is correct.
Now,
and to answer that question, if you want to discuss that first, does the alien have implants? The answer is, in my opinion, and I have to step back a little bit and say it this way: do aliens have implants? The answer to the question is, obviously, in my opinion, they do. And to set this up to make sense to your audience, we need to do it this way. In the view of most people in the UFO field and in general, most of us look at the alien as, and I'm going to paint a picture here with words of what we think to be real in the UFO community. First one is the little gray, the little guy. I'm just going to do this very briefly. The little short guy, he's about 2 to 3 foot tall. He has an IQ of about 80. And I can discuss this with anybody at any length, but I'm just going to throw things out there that people may or may not be familiar with.
Okay.
He's not very intelligent, makes all kinds of mistakes. He's a real short little guy. And the next guy in the usual suspects lineup I'm painting here is one often referred to as the doctor. He looks just like the little guy, but he's about 4.5 to 5 foot tall. And this guy is extremely intelligent. He's got an IQ of about 150, 160. Really intelligent, and everybody assumes that when you're the little gray guy, the little short one, you grow up and become the doctor. Well, you don't. What you're looking at is a finished product. These guys don't grow up and become anything else. They are what they are, and I'll explain that in a moment. My first abduction event in 1952 that I remember. The third entity I'd like to mention is in our usual suspects lineup, like a police lineup, because I used to be a cop, is an entity that looks like a reptile. And these guys are extremely sexual, very violent. They're pretty rough characters. Anybody's been around them, they know what I'm talking about. Another character is a human-like being, sometimes referred to as a Nordic, which is a misnomer. The fact is there are entities out there that look human-like that are red-haired, black-haired, blonde-haired, and brown-haired. I mean, we have all kinds. The idea that there is a quote-unquote Nordic and nothing else is just not true. That's just from someone that's not informed, or they've only seen just the one entity. There are numerous of these human types. They are discernibly different than human, but they are human-like. The next entity in the lineup stands about 6 foot 9 to nearly 8 foot tall. Some people refer to him as Bigfoot. We've actually seen him on craft with these other entities. In fact, all of these entities on the same craft at the same time. So some people say, no, they're all different races of aliens, and I'm going to kind of clobber that idea here in a minute with my own thinking. And by the way, some of it very painful, is in fact that these entities are constructed completely and literally are implants.
And designed for specific purposes in each model. Or each model has its own purpose, in other words.
Thank you, Royce. That is actually, I couldn't have said it better, and I thank you for saying it. That is the way my view is. Now, in the illustration of this, one might ask the next obvious question, oh, no. They live on a distant planet. My question always to these people is, and how did you discern that information? What credible evidence do you have to support that? Well, they come from Zeta Reticuli. I said, how do you know that? Well, because they told somebody. I said, well, they've lied to me and everyone else I've ever known for many years. What makes you think that they're telling the truth in one time in all of these events? And even if they were, what makes you think they actually come from there, even if they told you where it was at? And I mean, they told one group of people that they came from planet Banlon. Well, Banlon happens to be a deodorant. They will often use the imagery or the information in your own head, see what's in there, and they'll use that imagery to make you agreeable to it. And most of us imagine planets that are so beautiful and so wonderful, and wonderful spaceships flying around and beings floating through the air, cosmic beings of light, and it's so wonderful. And maybe that's true, and maybe it isn't. But in the events that I've been in, and many others have, that wasn't quite exactly the story. Sometimes that's the mental imagery we're given, but when you analyze the evidence or test that evidence, sometimes you find out those are screen memories or screensaver memories that are given to us to obfuscate